Welcome to another episode of Safe Space, the podcast for next generation family business leaders. Today we're joined by Dr. Sandra Primiano out of Montreal. Sandra, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So Sandra, before we get into the actual nitty-gritty of the conversation, if you can let the audience know a little bit about you, your background, and why do you do what you do, and then we'll get into the chat.
Sure. That sounds good. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been practicing for well over a decade in different private mental health spaces. And really over the last, about a decade or so, I've been helping to develop and implement more evidence-based private interventions for different mental health facilities for very exclusive populations. So that could be high-risk individuals, high net worth types of families and backgrounds. So really looking at exclusive type of boutique private mental health facilities, either inpatient or outpatient facilities, and what that looks like.
So what got you into clinical psychology? What was the thing that you said, I need to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think actually, I was really young. I was probably 13 years old and really interested in people's behaviors, just sort of understanding why somebody acts a certain way or why they have a certain reaction. And then understanding that there's certain things that drive us and issues that people can develop. And then just really wanting to help, becoming passionate about understanding why people develop certain issues, what that comes from, and then how we can have an impact. Really.
So in our conversation when we first met before the show, we're talking about burnout.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk about burnout. Where does it come from? The different types of burnout, but more importantly, the impact that has on the individual and the system they're a part of.
Yeah, I mean, burnout can come in many different types of forms. It can be in your professional life, right? It could also exist in your personal life, sort of your role in terms of, let's say, as a parent or as a caregiver. And it really comes with a lot of exhaustion and feelings of really, you can feel disenchanted, disconnected, not really wanting to do the kind of work you're doing, not feeling energized, not feeling motivated, starting to feel down, withdrawn, depressed. There's a cynicism that comes with burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we start to view the world or people very negatively in the space that we're in, and really just feeling disconnected from what we're doing, very tired. We can have issues around sleep, issues with your mood, anxiety, and this can come from either pressure, a lot of pressure in a work environment or in a certain role that you're having, inability to really relax, to let go, disconnection from values and purpose. So there's different factors depending on the person and the setting that can just lead to that sense of feeling overwhelmed, disconnected, cynical about what you're doing. But a lot of it comes from pressure, a lack of independence around your work. If you're forced or feeling forced to do things a certain way and you don't have autonomy in what you're doing, you don't have a say in your schedule or the type of work that you might be engaged in, and that feeling of it just being too much, whether it's the unrelenting types of standards that exist or that you put on yourself, or the actual workload, or the burden of certain roles that we might have. So there are lots of different factors, and it does look different than depression. It's not, when we talk about depression, depressed mood, lack of interest, lack of pleasure, negative thinking, sleep issues. There's symptoms that overlap, but it's really more about either could be, like we were saying, personal, professional type of role, and it's not just based on mood, let's say, or those types of feelings. It's really related to what we're doing.
So a couple questions. First of all, is let's take burnout into the family business, family wealth context. And the second question is, before I forget, that's what I'm asking, is what are some of the early signs that someone can start to realize, well, maybe I'm heading down the burnout path and it may not be a good thing for me?
Well, a big one is exhaustion. When we're constantly exhausted and we don't even know why anymore. We've slept, we've eaten, we've taken breaks, but we can't kick that feeling of just being exhausted, tired all the time, not finding energy, being really starting to get very negative, like that cynicism of whatever we, might be thinking in our minds about, oh, I don't like this, I don't want to do this, oh, this person, this, just that our outlook gets extremely negative. And that might be unlike us. I mean, if you're always like that, then that might not be a sign for you. But when you really start to approach things differently with that cynicism and exhaustion, and it doesn't matter how much you sleep and how much you relax, you're tired, you're negative. Your whole body feels that. And you can have, depressive thinking about certain situations, about yourself, about others. You can be stressed as well. So you will see some of those things that overlap with depression, like, low mood, sadness, anxiety, and stress. But it will be coupled by things like exhaustion and cynicism and negative outlook. And a lot of people will say that they don't feel connected anymore to whatever it is that they're doing. They don't care. They just don't care anymore.
So let's take that in the context of family business, because, one of the, we've got a concept at the firm here that we talk about. It's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. We haven't come up with a better name yet, so that we're sticking with that one for now. And they're the 4 main issues that all families of wealth and family businesses face. The first one is the fair versus equal.
Okay. Yeah.
Then there's the enable versus empower. There's burden versus responsibility, and an entitlement versus contribution. So let's focus on the burden versus the responsibility one, where, a family member, particularly a next generation member, feels the burden of having to take over the mantle when they don't really want it.
Yeah. Yeah.
How could that be the start of burnout for that individual?
Many things. So I love that one, because we see that, and we see that in this population often. It has to do with expectations and assumptions, and it has to do with communication. If there are assumptions made that this is what your role is going to be, and then there's an expectation that you take that on and you do it well, and there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And not only do you have to maintain what was created, but you have to also enhance it, bring it to another level, continue to grow. And then you might not even want to do that. And hence the sort of that poor communication or lack of communication with the assumptions made that this is what, this person's going to be doing. And was that conversation ever had? And if we look at then that sort of that next gen, that individual, do they know what is valuable to them in terms of, what they might want to pursue, what values they have? What about their self-identity? Do you know who you are? Do you know what sort of makes you happy and makes you feel connected and alive, right? It might not be, whatever, a family business, but there's that pressure, right? And those expectations. So then you get into that mode, you want to work, you want to meet the expectations, you want to continue to grow and maintain success and legacy, coupled with, is this me? And do I want this? And what do I value? Right? And not even knowing. And so we can see how this can lead to burnout very quickly. Anxiety as well, depression, and stress. So I think that one's a significant point. And then we can see how those factors contribute and then move somebody into that sort of state of burnout, exhaustion.
So, you brought up something interesting. So I want to expand on that, which is, we all have traditions. Traditions as simple as, how do we celebrate Christmas? How's the turkey or the ham done? How's the stuffing done? When do we actually eat Christmas meal? We also have emotional traditions, which are passed down from generation to generation to generation. And now there's scientific proof through epigenetics that shows that once you carry some of these emotional wounds in our bodies. Can you talk about that and how that impacts potential burnout and feeling the burden of having to take over the mantle when you don't really want to do it? And what's holding that individual back? So this is for you listeners that are in that place right now. What's holding you back from getting honest? We're saying, you know what, mom, dad, grandpa, grandmother, uncle, aunt, love you, really appreciate the wealth, but I don't like widgets. I want to be a florist.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I really like what you said, and it makes me think of sort of another term that I like to use, sort of that ancestral type of psychiatry and what we carry with us and how people behave. And in our families, if we see that there isn't a demonstration of vulnerability, for instance, right? People don't talk about real emotion. There isn't an openness to doing that. There's no space to do that. Why would you do that? Why, if you've grown up where mental health isn't discussed, vulnerability isn't shown, no matter what it is, we keep going, right? We move ahead and we're strong and we don't take a day off, and you're sick and you keep going. And I've got out of the hospital and I'm still, whatever, answering emails. Why would you feel comfortable to take up that space and express yourself? That even without anybody telling you, you can't talk about your emotions. Nobody needs to tell you that. Just look around. If you don't have good models of vulnerability, which is really what we're talking about, which I think allows us to really become stronger individuals, then we can talk about resilience all day or another time. But that first factor in there is awareness of what one is feeling in our emotions and, where we're at, and then being able anyway to regulate that. I won't go off on a tangent, but so if we do not have those models, and these are not common things that we're used to seeing in our environment, again, around communication, that's vulnerability, openness, we're not going to feel comfortable. And we may not even realize what we're feeling. There's a disconnect, so I'm going to back up. Do you have the awareness that you're even there? And like you're saying, maybe there are some viewers do, right? And then once you feel that and connect with that, what are you going to do? Is it okay to talk about it? Is it acceptable? What happens to people who talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
What, can I say no? Is it, an offer that you can't refuse? What happens to me if I become a florist? There's so much negative anticipation, right? And not really knowing what's going to come from that or how to manage that. It definitely can't imagine that being easy or obvious to manage.
I want to expand on the piece around connecting with our feelings. I heard this great quote that says, the journey to the path of transformation is by meandering through the forest of our feelings. And I think most of us as adults have forgotten to connect with our feelings. We're more connected than ever technologically.
Right.
I believe that we're more disconnected from our feelings than ever as well.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
How would you suggest or maybe create a simple path for individuals to go, how do I need to connect? Like these feelings, I've heard about them. They're out there. Maybe they're inside of me too. How do I reconnect? How do I find that path?
So it's different for different people. So some people, it might come from your body. It might be sort of a physical connection to ask yourself, what is it that I'm feeling in my body? Is my heart racing? Is my jaw clenched? Do I feel, like I have watery eyes? Do I feel tension in parts of my body? Some people are going to have a lot of trouble naming a feeling. And so they can start from their bodies. Notice tension. Where is your tension? In your shoulders? What does that mean? Are you stressed? Why am I stressed? So you can start from your body. That's a good way for a lot of people. And I really dislike stereotypes and even saying this, but for a lot of men, the body could be a good place to start. Look for tension, shoulders, jaw, things,
gut.
Things that we, yeah.
Knot in the gut.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Yeah, for sure. Stomach issues, stomach pain or indigestion issues happening there, tension in the chest, rapid breathing. So from a symptom or like a physical sensation, you compare it to a feeling. Once you're at the feeling, you can ask yourself, why? What is happening? What has happened? What am I thinking? Right? What's that related to? Some people can just straight out name the emotion. And if you're one of those people, then I think it's taking time, whatever that is at the beginning of your day, before you start your day, just thinking about, okay, how am I doing this morning? Setting some intention. What am I going to be doing today? How am I going to be doing that? And you can do it in the morning regularly. You can do it if there are moments of stress. You can do it at the end of the day to reflect on, how was my day? How did I show up? How did I feel? I think it has to become a reflex. You have to just take the time and then figure out how to get to the feeling. I like, the morning and setting intentions, or the end of the day. In the routine, like for some people, if it's less common now, but some people do still drive home from wherever they are. If you're driving home, it could be when you get in the car to have a ritual. Some people might be walking. When you're walking, you have that moment of disconnection from whatever you were doing, to then take a second to do that. For other people, I don't know, maybe I have my best ideas showering. So, hey, maybe, and there is that disconnection, right? And it allows you to connect with yourself differently, right? And so I think being able to find and name emotions that way, just depending on, the kind of person you are. If you're more cognitive, focus maybe more on the body. If you aren't able to name the emotion, name the emotion. And that's like step one in the awareness. And then find your routine. When is it? Is it the morning? Is it the middle of the day? Is it the end of the day? And then I think people need to think of mental health like physical health. And unfortunately, we really don't. And actually, people may not even really care for their physical health. But anyway, another story. I think we have to take the time to do that. Our mental or well-being is as important as our physical health. Do you know how you're feeling and why?
A psychologist friend of mine from South America talks about brain health.
Right.
Yeah. It's the most important organ in the body, and yet we don't focus on its health, right? Well, and which brings me back to a tool that someone in the firm created called ACT, which stands for, it's an acronym for Awareness, Choice, and Transformation.
Love it.
I believe that most of us are out there just repeating the same stuff over and over again, going through our mindless routines.
Right. Yeah.
And don't have enough awareness to go, gee, what's going on here? So can you talk about the actual process of slowing down and being mindful? So that awareness piece, let's talk about awareness and how do we start the awareness journey to avoid going into the burnout room?
I love that part of it and what you're saying. So being mindful is probably the best skill you can learn. And when people hear that, they think like, oh, I'm not going to go meditate for an hour. Nobody's asking you to meditate for an hour.
I got to go to Bali, right? I got to go to Bali to find mindfulness.
Sure, you can. I welcome that. But it can be, so I've worked with a lot of executives in professional services and elsewhere, very, high level. And these individuals don't have time to do even a 5-minute meditation. I get that. I get all of that. But here's how we can be mindful just in our gestures, right? So you can be mindful when you're brushing your hair. You can be mindful when you're brushing your teeth. You can be mindful when you walk. If you can get outside for 2 minutes, because we know nature is very good for managing stress. So any small action, if you're able to focus on what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're doing in that moment. Like I am picking up this, thermos and it's turquoise and I'm placing it here. And whatever you are able to look at, describe, and participate in, you are being mindful. So you can do it. That was an awful example. Sorry. But you can do it in anything that you are doing in your day. When you are walking, you can look at trees and describe trees, colors, your shoes, whatever it is. That way of connecting in reality, which is different than you being stuck in your mind and your thoughts and your next task and what you're doing or scrolling mindlessly, whatever, is going to put yourself in a different mental state. And that's what's going to allow you to start developing awareness about physical sensations, feelings, and making those connections. And those very small, deliberate actions are relaxing in themselves because your brain is connecting is in a different way than you're used to. So if you can find ways of being mindful in very deliberate and simple ways, you can transform your well-being and develop that awareness. That's a great tool.
So we go from awareness to realizing that we actually have choice because,
Right.
people don't believe that they have the choice in how they react, which is the automatic response to a trigger.
Right.
So let's move from having the awareness. Let's take the next evolution to the choice piece. Like if someone has tendency to get angry,
right,
they can feel that anger sort of coming up. And before they go, they can go, oh, pause.
Right.
What can I choose different?
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk us through that process, which actually takes milliseconds, but it's transformative for an individual and their relationships?
Well, it's super interesting because anger, as an example in particular, people who have expressions of anger or explosive types of moments, there are many warning signs and triggers. They just don't know what they are. You're not paying attention to them. And it actually happens over time. It's not that fast. Once you start to notice the escalation in your body, like naming some physical sensations around making fists or clenching jaws or whatever you're feeling, to thoughts about, oh, why did they do this? And, they're in my way or stopping me from, whatever. Before you even get to that, it escalates. So there are moments in between, first of all, us becoming aware of things that we're feeling, sensations, thoughts that we're having, and then realizing that we're about to, whatever it is, yell or, I don't know, leave, withdraw. Like some of us will withdraw or, end a conversation, hang up, scream, whatever it is. For you then to say, how do I want to show up? How do I want my behavior to be in this moment? And so there always is choice. It's just learning how to give yourself that second to make it. And then to want to make it, because you could have done all of what we described, your awareness, realizing there's a trigger. You're aware. You're going to engage in a behavior and say, I want to anyway. There's also that. So, but you do have the choice to behave differently and to take that second and that pause. And I think you have to want to do something different, but you do always have the choice. That is the one thing we can control, is how we act, right? And actually, we can change how we feel. So we can control how we feel and how we act. We can't control the situation or the trigger, but you always have the choice for how you feel and behave. Always. That is up to you.
So we're coming to the top of the hour, and there's so much more that I would like to talk about. So, Sandra, if I may suggest, and we hadn't talked about this before, is
Sure.
let's have a part 2 of this show, because what I would really like to focus on, if you agree on this, is the next episode really be about transformation. Because we've talked about awareness and choice, and as you said, we always have a choice to continue the behavior or to change it. So I think it would be really valuable for the audience if we focused on the transformation piece. How do we get the transformation? And more importantly, why do we want to transform? Because everything we do has a payoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that idea. And what popped into mind, and I think it's important in this population, values and identity driving choices, decisions, behaviors. Yeah.
So we'll pick up in the next episode. So listeners, we're leaving you hanging on purpose because this is an important conversation. We don't want to cram it all in so you go, oh, we just listened to that. But we really want to set the stage for what really is happening, which is transformation based on values and identity. So Sandra, I always ask, or Dr. Sandra, I always ask our guests the same question at the end of the show.
Okay.
And the question is, what's one piece of advice you can offer the listeners based on your experience and what we talked about to set the tone for the next episode?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to getting to know yourself and your needs and your values. We have, and this is going to sound so cliche, but really one life, right? And it's short. So know yourself, build that awareness, not only in the moment, but of your values and your needs. And to have a fulfilling life and be happy, we need to connect to that.
Wonderful words of wisdom. So, Dr. Sandra, if people wanted to find you and engage you, how do they find you?
Through probably either LinkedIn or email as well. I'm fine to share. It's my name. It's Sandra Primiano at gmail.com for now. Yeah.
So, Dr. Sandra, thank you so much for your generosity and your wisdom and your humor. Really appreciate taking these complex subjects and boiling them down to the simplicity. And audience, as you know, our guests volunteer their time because they care about you. It's being in this demographic, next generation part of a family business can be a very lonely place. And sometimes you feel that you're the only one facing these issues. and we can assure you that you're not alone, which is why we created this community through this podcast. So Dr. Sandra, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a real honor.
Thank you so much.
And we're looking forward to the next episode. So listeners, pay attention, log in for the next one, but most importantly, share the learnings.